Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soft Stories. I'm Stratton, and this is Pepper, and today I thought that we could begin a series of short stories as a little extra in addition to our weekly serialized Friday videos. This is a series of short stories that I read and was read in my youth, and which I'd like to share with you. But as I do so, I think it's important that I offer some background to these stories. The stories in question are the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling. Now, Kipling was, for many years, considered to be one of the great literary figures in Britain. He lived during the late 19th and early 20th century and spent a lot of his time outside of England in nations that were at the time colonized by the British Empire. And so much of his writing deals with lands and peoples and cultures which he had a very colonialist view of. His most famous work, of course, being The Jungle Book. Rudyard Kipling's other stories present a point of view and a moral compass that has rightly received considerable criticism in the modern world, but also at the time, from people in the Indian subcontinent and elsewhere who felt and indeed were absolutely correct to feel that he did not do their cultures, their peoples, and their homelands any justice with his writings. That is a point of view which I accept wholeheartedly and wish to respect in my readings of his work. And at the same time, I am not a person, as you might know if you have followed some of my other books that I've covered, I am not a person that wishes to paper over the past and the damaging worldviews held by people in the past and held by people today. A lot has rightly been made of the editing of the works of Roald Dahl, for example, to remove some of the more racist and culturally insensitive material from his work, which is a practice that I have many problems with as someone who believes that authors should be accountable for their beliefs and that we should not present a sanitized version of those beliefs, of those people, to future generations. History is often painful, but it does not allow us to learn from it if we forget it. And it is with that idea in mind that I want to present the Just So stories. I do not think that this will be a regular series or as regular as the other episodes, the Friday episodes. But I hope that you will enjoy experiencing these stories again with me in a way that grants insight into the person who wrote them and the attitudes he held and the attitudes of a time and place that is gone by. I apologize for taking so long in the introduction, but I thought that it was important that we have a discussion and that this material would not be presented without comment or recognition of the harm that it has caused, in spite of the beauty of its prose. If you decide that this series is not for you, I completely respect that decision, and I hope that you will join us for other stories in the future. Thank you very much. With that said, let us begin the first of the Just So stories in this Kipling collection by John Beecroft. The first story which I have here is How the Whale Got His Throat. In the sea, once upon a time, O my best beloved, there was a whale, and he ate fishes. He ate the starfish and the garfish, and the crab and the dab, and the plaice and the dace, and the skate and his mate, and the mackerel and the pickerel, and the really truly twirly-whirly eel. All the fishes he could find in all the sea he ate with his mouth, so. Till at last there was only one small fish left in all the sea, and he was a small 'stute fish, and he swam a little behind the whale's right ear, so as to be out of harm's way. Then the whale stood up on his tail and said, "I'm hungry." And the small 'stute fish said in a small 'stute voice, "Noble and generous cetacean, have you ever tasted man?" "No," said the whale. "What is it like?" "Nice," said the small 'stute fish. "Nice, but nubbly." "Then fetch me some," said the whale, and he made the sea froth up with his tail. "One at a time is enough," said the 'stute fish. "If you swim to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, that is magic, you will find, sitting on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing on but a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders — you must not forget the suspenders, best beloved — and a jackknife, one shipwrecked mariner, who, it is only fair to tell you, is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam to latitude 50 north, longitude 40 west, as fast as he could swim, and on a raft in the middle of the sea, with nothing to wear except a pair of blue canvas breeches, a pair of suspenders. You must particularly remember the suspenders, best beloved, and a jackknife. He found one single, solitary, shipwrecked mariner, trailing his toes in the water. He had his mummy's leave to paddle, or else he would never have done it, because he was a man of infinite resource and sagacity. Then the whale opened his mouth back and back and back till it nearly touched his tail, and he swallowed the shipwrecked mariner, and the raft he was sitting on, and his blue canvas breeches, and the suspenders, which you must not forget, and the jackknife. He swallowed them all down into his warm, dark inside cupboards, and then he smacked his lips, so, and turned round 3 times on his tail. But as soon as the mariner, who was a man of infinite resource and sagacity, found himself truly inside the whale's warm, dark inside cupboards, he stumped, and he jumped, and he thumped, and he bumped, and he pranced, and he danced, and he banged, and he clanged, and he hit, and he bit, and he leaped, and he creeped, and he prowled, and he howled, and he hopped, and he dropped, and he cried, and he sighed, and he crawled, and he bawled, and he stepped, and he leapt, and he danced hornpipes where he shouldn't. And the whale felt most unhappy indeed. Have you forgotten the suspenders? So he said to the 'stute fish, "This man is very nubbly, and besides, he is making me hiccup. What shall I do?" "Tell him to come out," said the 'stute fish. So the whale called down his own throat to the shipwrecked mariner, "Come out and behave yourself. I've got the hiccups." "Nay, nay," said the mariner, "not so, but far otherwise. Take me to my natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and I'll think about it." And he began to dance more than ever. "You'd better take him home," said the 'stute fish to the whale. "I ought to have warned you that he is a man of infinite resource and sagacity." So the whale swam and swam and swam, with both flippers and his tail, as hard as he could for the hiccups. And at last he saw the mariner's natal shore and the white cliffs of Albion, and he rushed halfway up the beach, and opened his mouth wide and wide and wide, and said, "Change here for Winchester, Alshot, Nashua, Keene, and the stations on the Fitchburg Road." And just as he said Fitch, the mariner walked out of his mouth. But while the whale had been swimming, the mariner, who was, indeed, a person of infinite resource and sagacity, had taken his jackknife and cut up the raft into a little square grating, all running criss-cross, and he had tied it firm with his suspenders. Now you know why you are not to forget the suspenders. And he dragged that grating good and tight into the whale's throat, and there it stuck. Then he recited the following sloka, which, as you have not heard it, I will now proceed to relate. By means of a grating I have stopped your eating. For the mariner, he was also a Hibernian, and he stepped out on the shingle and went home to his mother, and had given him leave, who had given him leave to trail his toes in the water, and he married and lived happily ever after. So did the whale. But from that day on, the grating in his throat, which he could neither cough up nor swallow down, prevented him eating anything except very, very small fish. And that is the reason why whales nowadays never eat men or boys or little girls. The small 'stute fish went and hid himself in the mud under the door-sills of the equator. He was afraid that the whale might be angry with him. The sailor took the jackknife home. He was wearing the blue canvas breeches when he walked out on the shingle. The suspenders were left behind, you see, to tie the grating with. And that is the end of that tale. When the cabin portholes are dark and green because of the ships outside, when the ship goes whop with a wiggle between, and the steward falls into the soup tureen, and the trunks begin to slide, when Nursie lies on the floor in a heap, and Mummy tells you to let her sleep, and you aren't waked or washed or dressed, why, then you will know, if you haven't guessed, you're 50 north and 40 west. All right, everyone. That is it for How the Whale Got His Throat, the first of the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And I hope that the story was entertaining to you. There's not much left to say, except to reiterate how grateful I am that all of you have stopped in to listen to the story, but also to hear a bit of my own rambling thoughts on literature and the importance of history. Thank you again for joining me today. I'll see you soon, in fact, very soon, for the next installment of George Eliot's Silas Marner. But until next we meet, I wish you all the best, and goodbye.